Hello, everyone. This video is going to be a bit different than the normal, hey, this is what's new in the latest version of Linux Mint. What I'm going to do is talk about how I use Linux Mint, what the computer is that I'm on, what the previous environment was, and how I've got to the latest version of Linux Mint, plus the issues I've found so far. I have been using it now for more than 24 hours, and I've got everything back to how I wanted it in terms of getting all the applications installed, configured, and getting all the environment working in a state that I'm happy with. So a bit about my history with Linux Mint. I've been using it since at least version 12, I think it is. So that's back in 2012. And as I mentioned, I've gone through all the different versions and things to previously 18.3. Now, I didn't do every single point release. Sometimes when I was very happy with the environment, I just waited until there was a feature or a series of features that I was interested in. And that's part of the reason I've moved from 18.3 to 19.1. There's a couple of things that I was interested in seeing if they were being fixed and some of the new features as well. One of the big ones was sound management, and we'll see what happens with that as we go through this. So in terms of the hardware that we're running on here, it is an older processor now. It's an i5 4690, and that's a 4-core processor. Got 16 gigs of RAM, a whole bunch of disk, which I'll go into more shortly. And then this graphics card here was basically the cheapest one I could find that would run the resolution that I need on the screen. So at the moment, I'm recording this in 1080p, but I actually run on an LG C7 4K TV that is 55 inches. And to run at the resolution, I needed this graphics card. Now, what I decided was, because I'm running at 1080p, is when I recorded the videos and just started playing around at 4K, it was obviously going to be too hard to watch if you were just looking at a lower resolution on your screen. So hopefully that will work for most people. Onto the disks, we've got over here a 1 TB Samsung SSD that is now the primary drive. Previously, I was using a 128 gig Plextor SSD, and that had been working absolutely fine for the past few years, and I had no problems with it, but it was just not big enough anymore. And as a result of that, what I used to have is this 4 TB drive was actually linked from my home directory to directories on here for things like videos, pictures, documents, basically all the, even Dropbox, all the big stuff that would have normally had to try and fit on that 128 gig drive, which simply wouldn't have, was sitting on here. So now I've copied most of that content onto here, and you can see that is about half full. Now, I don't even need half the stuff that's on there. I can probably remove a lot of things to keep that. So I've got plenty of headroom there. The other 8 TB drives, they are all part of this RAID array here. And this is really my backup drive for storing all my media, my backups. It's got backups from work going back many years, a whole bunch of data on there, like Blu-ray rips, etc. That is absolutely critical for me to keep alive, and that's gone through many iterations, running as a software RAID from originally 500 gig drives, then to 2 TB, to 4, and now to 8. And I've had a couple of drive failures along the way, but everything's been managed nicely and it all operates quite well. So that's the hardware and how everything hooks up. On the internet side of things and the network, the computer's on a 1 gig network going back to the internet at 500 megabit per second. Up and down. This is in Singapore on fiber, so we get quite good internet here for not much money, which is awesome. And then the other thing is that this is my primary computer, right? So this is my home computer where I spend quite a bit of time. It's also where I work when I'm at home. And unfortunately, to work, I do need Windows. So I do have down here a virtual machine. And I use this to get into the Windows environment, but I still can't work here because I actually have to get to my virtual desktop. So I've got Linux to Windows, and then this is my work environment. The amazing thing is, and I think this is just a testament to how much the technology has evolved, is here's a video that is someone comparing 19.1 to the older version 19. And this is running essentially on a virtualized workspace, running on a virtualized Windows, are running on Linux Mint. And if I press play on this,
G'day
you
YouTube.
will actually be
This
able
is
to
just
hear
a bit of a
the
brief
audio
look
in
at
the
the
background,
differences or
and
the
I can
main
watch
differences
videos
between
on
Linux
here,
Mint
get the audio.
19 and
Everything
Linux
works
Mint
quite seamlessly through
19.1.
all those
So
layers.
as
So I think that's quite astounding, but I'm very happy with this environment. So this is, I spend a lot of time in this environment. I obviously make it much larger than this, especially when I have my 4K screen. The resolution I have there, I can really make use of that for doing work. So what are some of the things that I did to get from where I was, and how did I do all the upgrade, or if you like, fresh installation process? So the first thing I did is looked at the release notes. Now, I think this is really important when you go through and you're about to either do an upgrade or do a fresh install. And there was things in here which actually impacted me. So it wasn't the touchpad. Definitely, VirtualBox was going to be something that I needed to be aware of, but there was nothing there to worry about. It was just pretty much standard stuff. And then coming down here, I do use a scanner. I have a Brother multifunction laser printer and scanner, etc. And I do use the Xsane interface to do all of those scanning activities. So I thought, well, that's going to be a bit of a problem, because that's always been a bit tricky to get working effectively. And in fact, I've even had to write a blog post on that, more for me to remember what to do than anything else. So that was important. There wasn't anything else there, but it is really important to go through and have a look at what else is in here that might be impacting you, especially when you get down to this section here. If you get into freezers and things, you really do need to know what to do when you get yourself out of that trouble, because you might end up in not being able to boot very smoothly and end up in a bit of a mess, and Googling like mad to try and figure out what to do. So I did all that, made sure I understood what the issues were going to be. I backed up all my data onto other drives, and obviously onto the RAID array as well. And then I downloaded the latest version of Linux Mint Cinnamon 64-bit and created a bootable USB drive. Now, I ran the live version of the beta, and it actually crashed on me when I was playing a YouTube video, so that didn't give me much confidence. But I thought, oh well, we'll try the same test, and I ran a couple of YouTube videos and everything, and it was all fine. So I thought, all right, we'll have a go and start doing the installation. So I started the installation, and everything was going really well right until the end. And this is what happened. Now, sorry about the horrible mosaic, but this was a picture I took with my phone of the screen. And as you can see in the background there, with the installation has finished, everything was literally considered to be at the end, and you got a nice message, and you think, oh, it's all actually good. And then this popped up. And this was a bit weird, because this is actually a picture I took after a bit of retrying. The first one that came up said dev SDA. And if we go back to the drives, you'll see that SDA here is actually the one of the 8 TB drives, and the one I'm installing on is SDB. So I then went back, and there's a pop-up that comes and it asks you to retry and you can choose a different drive and what have you. So I tried SDB, and yeah, didn't get anywhere either. So after that, I did a frantic amount of Googling, looking at the Linux Mint forums and so on. There's a few people who are having similar issues, but there wasn't really a resolution that was very clear cut, apart from one which seemed quite sensible to try, which was to remove all the other drives. So what I did is I unplugged all the other drives here, except for the Samsung, because I actually did try going into the BIOS and changing the order of the boot order and all that kind of stuff. It didn't have any impact. And I think it's what's happening is it's coming from the SATA ports themselves, and this is always going to be the first disk, and something was just not working. Anyway, I disconnected all of these, did the installation. It worked smoothly, no problem on this disk. Then I shut down, reconnected all the drives, and started up again, and everything was fine. Now, the interesting thing is that here we are in 2018, and to have this kind of error installing what I consider to be one of the more mature Linux distributions was quite disappointing, to be honest. But nevertheless, we worked around it, and everything is working. So I think The other note was during the installation, when I was trying to work out what was going on, I was installing in the full resolution on the 4K, and there's a little there's a dialog box that comes up and shows you, all the installation and the bit of graphics about some of the features and things. And there's a little details thing you can click on. It's so small in the 4K that it's really, you have to squint to see what's going on. So I think that's something that could be worked on for, again, those of us with larger screens and larger resolutions to help us out with what's actually happening. Um, all right. The other thing is, and I'll just get rid of this because it's pretty horrible to look at. When I have this type of environment, one thing that I would have appreciate, and this is something that's been bugging me for a number of years now, is that if I have all of this topology, and it's pretty straightforward to understand by looking at the disks what they are, and that they are part of a RAID array and so on. It would be really nice if Linux Mint actually recognized this, installed MDAM, and was able to give me the ability to actually create or assemble the RAID array as part of the installation, and perhaps even provide some mount points and just make that whole process smoother. Because the only way to do that is to effectively get everything installed and then get into the command line and reassemble everything and do all that. Now, I'm fine with doing that, but it would just be nice if that was made to be easier. The other thing I mentioned at the start that I really wanted to try and see if it would be better is around sound management. So I use headphones, which I'm using at the moment to record this, and then I also switch to the TV output. And obviously I do that back and forth depending on what's happening. So if I come down here, I often right-clicking on this, and then at the moment everything's working because I'm actually doing a recording and I'm using an output device at the same time. But these input and output things can actually disappear. So sometimes when let's say I'm about to do a call and I want to change the input and output devices, I can't actually find, sometimes the input is just not there, or sometimes the output's not there. These are the output devices that I have. And right now it's showing null, which is impressive. That must be something to do with the way that's being recorded. Anyway, um, yeah, it's super frustrating. And then what happens is I have to come down, and then I have to go to sound settings, and then bring it up, and then actually change something here. So that's really quite annoying. Unfortunately, obviously hasn't changed in 19.1. Perhaps I should get around to actually logging a feature request or something. But that is just one of the things that really bugs me about using Linux Mint at the moment, because it is something I'm doing all the time, putting my headphones on, taking them off, changing the output. Especially I've got kids. We do Skype calls with the grandparents, and that needs to be on the TV, and it needs to use the webcam microphone so that they can hear everything. And then if it's just me having a conversation, then I need to put that back on with the headphones and change all that around. So that's a super frustrating thing. It's easy to do, but again, it just would be nice if it was built in, and I was just able to come in here and change it like I can do right now. But literally, sometimes this is not even an option. All right, the next thing is, especially on a 4K screen, the default for the date and time down here, it literally is pretty much just the time. And I just would like to see the day and the date and not have to pop up the calendar and see what is actually going on. Again, it's a small change, it's an easy setting to do, but it's something I have to do every time I install Linux Mint. And even with all of these windows and things open over here, and I pin some things to the bar, there's still plenty of real estate here, and there's no excuse. And remember, this is on 1080p, and I'm running at 4K. There's even more space at 4K. So that's something that I would like to be fixed by default. Something which I can't show you, but something that definitely happens on some 4K videos. I'm not getting, it seems, hardware acceleration from the card. Now, I suspect that might be the graphics card. So coming back, that simply might not be powerful enough to run 4K at full frame rate from YouTube. But there was a particular video recorded in Cambodia, I think it was. I tried watching that, and sometimes the screen would freeze. The CPUs were running at like 100% across all cores, it was pretty intense. And I just wonder if that's something to do with the operating system or the drivers and support of the acceleration, or whether it is my card. So I'd like to see if that could be addressed, and I'll have to try and spend a bit of time to understand more about that. The other thing relating to the display, and this is quite interesting. So if I click on display, and it says here it is a 72-inch screen. It is definitely not. That would be absolutely ridiculous to use a monitor. In fact, 55-inch screen that I have is also quite ridiculous. And I think if anyone's looking at that, 47 inch is probably the sweet spot. Anyway, this is just not correct. So something's going on there with the configuration of display as well. Also related to display, but you can't see it at the moment, is when I'm running, I think it's more in 4K, I will actually get the screen cut off. So I can't see the last digit here. So I can't see the minute. And that sometimes it bounces back, and then sometimes it bounces to the right. I'm guessing that's an Nvidia driver issue. I might have to install the latest drivers manually rather than use the managed drivers, which actually I'll show you what I'm doing there at the moment. So driver manager. Right, so this is just going to show the proprietary drivers, if you like, that I'm using. And you can see that I am using the Nvidia driver at the moment. Not that keen on the Nova one. Had many problems with that. I didn't even try it, to be honest, other than booting as soon as I could. I just changed it to this one here. So I might go around and do the old-fashioned way of putting the latest version of Nvidia driver in and see if that addresses anything. But it's not a minor issue. It's not that bad at the moment. The other thing is that SU behavior changed. So previously, and this was kind of interesting, I was able to just go SU minus, and maybe I did a configuration thing to change. I could put my password in, and it would go through, but now it doesn't do that. So I have to do a sudo su minus, and then I can do that and change through, and it goes through. So that's fine, and that's, let's be honest, that's a better way of doing things. But it was just something that was unexpected because I'm so used to doing it the other way. Anyway, the other thing was coming back to the problems that we mentioned further up here, which was, whoops, going down, sorry, the scanner not being detected. And indeed, when I installed all of the brother drivers and everything, I was not able to get the not able to get the scanner to appear. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to be done that were very similar to what happened in the previous version of Linux Mint. In fact, I'll go to my blog and show you what's happened there. So I don't blog very often, so it's more a thing for memory purposes. But this was essentially the last thing. And here you can see there was a whole bunch of things that had to be linked. Basically, the old drivers were not being looked for in the right place. So we had to move them across. And it was exactly the same problem that was able to be fixed just by doing links, except the path had changed. And this was listed in the bug, which if you follow the path from the release notes, where over here, you go to this and look at the bug, you'll see all the history and find people definitely started to get to a solution by doing the same linking. The other one that was something that I, of course, just probably did ages ago and just didn't realize because I'd done a series of upgrades rather than fresh installs, was that the Microsoft fonts were not installed. So I had to install those. And that was just to get the basics, like your Arial and Courier fonts and so on. Another thing which is quite funny, it shows you how I don't really configure Linux Mint myself that much. But when I was looking at, if I go to the settings, I didn't realize that this was actually here. And by default, media player is the default video player, and I prefer to use VLC. So funny story, but I used to go on right click on all the file types and change them basically as it came up with media player and convert them to VLC. So I'm very glad that this is here, and it was quite funny that I didn't realize it was there. That was just something that was used to annoy me, and I was able to fix that very easily. One of the big ones that if you look at the Linux Mint welcome, and then it's got the first steps, it asks you to do system snapshots. And I thought, right, I'm definitely going to do it this time. It seems this is one of the new features I thought was quite reasonable. Sometimes if you don't want to make any changes because you're just worried that the system will get unstable, but this would be a way to protect that, so you can try a few different things. If I launch this, and it's supposed to be able to run timeshift, and if I put my password in and authenticate, nothing happens. And I have tried to launch timeshift at the command line, and that produced an error. So basically, there's something fundamentally wrong, and I don't know what that is. I haven't had time to get to the bottom of it because it wasn't something critical. I had to get a few other things done to get all the environment working. But that was quite disappointing because that was one of the main things that I wanted to look at, apart from trying to get the sound fixed, and of course the sound's not fixed either. The other thing that is really good, and this is, I'll just go to the new features because this is something that used to annoy me. Again, because I've been using Linux Mint for so long, I did have a whole series of kernels and things installed, and I went to clean them up. And the old way, you actually had to do every single kernel as a single operation. You had to enter your password every time, and then you'd have to go back in and go find where you were and all that kind of stuff. And at one stage, I think I must have removed around 10 to 15 kernels, and it was just annoying. Now there's this nice window which you can see, and that's from this little button here, where you just get that and you can get rid of all the old stuff and make sure that everything is clean and there's not wasted space and all those things around. Another interesting thing, which was if you noticed on the drivers, there was no Intel firmware, which I'm not sure what happened there, but that's disappeared because that was always something that was there. And then the other thing is, if we go to screensavers, now this again must be something I've just missed, but there is no capability here, it seems, to change the screensaver to anything other than the standard Linux Mint screensaver. So I swear that on the previous versions there was options to do that, but at the moment there doesn't seem to be any ability to do that. So I must have to install something else to get some different screensavers, but it's not not a big priority, but it was just something that seemed strange. Then on the graphics and things, on the way the window manager works, if I look at this this window here, you can see that these dotted lines just at the very bottom of this window, which is signaling to you that you can scroll down. There's two scroll bars here, and if you just let the window rest, they go away, and it's not obvious when you come in how this works. So I was using the scroll wheel here to go down, and then going, hang on a sec, there's more here. What's going on? Why can't I get down? But there's actually two scroll areas. So there's the main window there, and then there's this widget inside which you have to scroll in. I don't understand this, to be honest. It's a bit weird. It seems a bit strange. So not really a fan of this. I'm not sure if it's new. As you can probably tell, I don't particularly go into the settings and things and fiddle around too much. But as I was just playing around this time, I noticed this and I thought that was a bit strange. So that's basically the issues that I've found. And then I'll just go through the applications that I use and any problems I've had with those. So I use the Firefox browser. I'm just showing Chrome so that it's clean and there's not all my other history and everything in there. And that came across, I just restored the bookmarks. So I decided to have a fresh install and put all of my add-ons in, no problems at all. That's all going very smoothly. I haven't really used Chrome. I do use that sometimes just to make sure that if I'm wanting to test websites and if they're behaving differently with different browsers. I do use Skype, Telegram, Viber, Wire, and Signal. They are all working well, although you can actually see down here at the moment, Telegram has a notification. there are no notifications. And I actually had this the last time I installed Telegram, and I can't remember for the life of me how I got rid of it. I might have to uninstall and install it again because it's quite annoying to see that there. But there are literally no notifications. There's no unread messages or anything. It's all fine. So that's a bit annoying. The Dropbox is working fine. Everything's synced. There was no issues. I use Darktable for manipulating images. That's all working fine. No problems there. Xsane, and I might show you these in the different areas. So for is Darktable there. This I love that program. Xsane for image scanning. That's all working. There's no issues there as well. VirtualBox, which we've already talked about. I use Electrum for the Bitcoin wallet. That's all working fine. The other one here, so that's Electrum there. FileZilla, that's all fine. No problems at all. Rimina, I had some issues about the negotiation, but that was just a settings thing that I didn't realize on the box that I was connecting to. This is another system that I have on Amazon Web Services that I need to connect to sometimes, and that's all working fine now. Thunderbird is all good, so no issues with that. I've just basically restored the all the files from the previous account, and it picked it all up and worked fine. I used Zoom for some customer meetings, and that works fine as well. I did have Plex installed for managing all the media and stuff. I'm going to give that a fresh install. So I haven't, that's in fact the one thing that I haven't done at the moment. I use Emacs. Yes, you can all fight about what your favorite is, but I'm a bit of an Emacs person. So that's been installed. And of course, that works fine. For ripping, I use Make MKV, and that has been working fine as well. I just basically reconfigured it, put my license in. I did pay them some money for that. And then Tomboy and the accessories, that's Tomboy Notes, that's also working fine, no issues. I was able to bring the data across from the previous install, and it just picked it up. Everything came up, no problems at all. I do have a cron job which uses rsync to basically copy my home directory across to that to the big RAID array, and that's already done a test run. That's working fine. So I've set up the cron job. Hopefully that'll go through tonight as well. And then I do have another user that I have on this computer. Well, a couple of users. One for my wife, which she uses sometimes to do scanning, or if she wants to get the kids watching something on here rather than on hers when I'm traveling. And that's all working as well. And then I have a user myself, which I set up basically as just a minimal user with nothing really in it. If I need to go and do some work on, visiting some websites that I'm not really trusting, or if I've received some dodgy email and I'm not sure where that website's come from, basically just a restricted account so that I can test if I'm worried about something. And that was all fine. I was able to bring the data across from that, not as much there. So fundamentally, it's all working pretty well. There's a few gripes along the way, but once I've installed everything, it's back to how it was before in terms of I can do my work, I can use the browsing, I've made Skype calls to my family. Everything's working as expected. I haven't had any crashes yet, but there was one thing, and it's a bit interesting. But down here, of course, this is the new format, right? So there's different. We can see the different documents inside here when there's two windows or something. What happened at one stage is that things that were actually open did not have corresponding windows down here. There were some that did and some that didn't. I had multiple terminals open, and it was just showing one. So there was something really weird that got Cinnamon into a bit of a state, but I haven't been able to reproduce that. So maybe after doing all the updates and rebooting and so on, it's fixed everything. I'm not sure, but yeah, otherwise I'm pretty happy. It looks pretty good. I'm going to be using it. Obviously, I'm not going to go back to the previous version. Hope that this has been helpful. It's given you a few hints and tips, especially for that grub issue, because I think that was pretty nasty, and a number of people on the forum seem to have hit something similar around that. So thanks for your time, and hopefully it was